Hey guys, how's it going? It's Kyrie here. In today's video, we got a long one. There's going to be timestamps for everything down listed below. This is basically going to be a distilled breakdown of all the stuff that me and my fellow content creators have learned over the past 500 to 1,000 hours between us in Diablo 4. With the combination of the launch of the game and the early access, we've been playing this game a ton, we've learned a lot, and we want to share it with you guys. I'm going to have links listed to all 4 other channels listed down below if there's other things you guys want to learn about Diablo 4. And there's going to be some bonus tips from a few of the content creators in this video. This one definitely took more effort than the normal video, so if you want more videos like this, I'm more than happy to make them. I just want to see if you guys are interested. So please let me know down in the comments below. And with that, let's get into it. First tip, going to your options, going to gameplay, and making sure advanced tooltip information is checked on. It is not turned on by default. This is incredibly important to be able to understand just how good a piece of gear is. So when that is turned on, you'll actually be able to see the specific rolls it can actually land. So right now, Whirlwind explodes after the end, dealing 20%. But I now know, because I turned on the advanced tooltip, that it could be anywhere from 16 to 26%. So I have an actual real idea of how good this roll was. Next is going to be getting your horse. You can get your horse at the end of Act 3. So just focus on the campaign. Main reason why I'm bringing this up is, obviously you get way better movement speed because of the horse, but because it is the #1 priority. The only things you can be doing are going to be, while waiting for more campaign, is moving around the map. I always recommend you just do campaign at least in the end of Act 3 to get your horse. Then you can move on to other things, such as collecting Lilith statues, such as going to renowned locations and side quests. Next is going to be the Blacksmith. We have actually quite a few things to discuss here. We have salvage, repair, and upgrade. Let's start with salvage. Very straightforward for the most part. You're going to be breaking down pieces you don't want and just looking through and seeing if you want to keep the piece or if you want to get rid of it. Breaking down legendary pieces is actually important to do. There's going to be currencies that we're going to be able to need to spend when applying legendary affixes. But before you break down the piece, make sure that the legendary affix you have is either a bad roll or it's a specific legendary effect you don't care about, and you don't care about turning into a consumable aspect that you're going to apply to another piece later. And then also we have a bonus tip here from Chosen. This is going to apply to this section of the video, so let's check that out.
Hey, this is Chosen. Thanks for having me over on your channel, Kyrie. Appreciate it. Good to be here. Now, the one quick tip that I would want to give to Diablo 4 players out there here for the video is to make sure that you are selling your yellow rare artifacts instead of salvaging them. I see a lot of people going to the Blacksmith and just clicking salvage all, doing the yellows, doing the legendaries they don't want and all of that. But eventually, after you have 50 or 100 hours in the game or whatever, your materials are gonna look like this. You're gonna get maxed out at 9,999 of the veiled crystals, and then you're just gonna be wasting them, dropping them on the ground, or constantly having to go spend them and all of that, and you're gonna lose out on all of the gold that you could have had if you managed your materials properly. And gold is a huge bottleneck in this game. It's super expensive later in the game when you want to start min-maxing your builds and re-rolling to get perfect stats on items. You're going to need a lot of gold, and you're going to wish that you sold all of those yellows instead, because you'll have plenty of veiled crystals. So hope this quick Diablo 4 tip helps you, and good luck.
Next we have repair. Very straightforward. When you die, you take 10% vulnerability damage to the piece of gear here, and then when it breaks, then the piece just stops working until you pay a pretty decent amount of gold here to be able to make it work again. Then we have upgraded item. This is something that I was worried about initially when it came to the amount of resources it takes, but you can be very confident in upgrading at least the 3 first levels. So notice that this is what happens when you level it up. You're getting decent stat upgrades, but I have 2,342 rawhides. I've seen other content creators that have, just been blasting, playing the game like normal, but not doing anything too crazy except just playing the game for this duration since the game came out, and they're already capped at 9,999. So rawhides are not going to be a resource we're going to need to worry about at all. Also, for the superior leather, you could just convert these into this, so that's also not going to be an issue. So upgrade 2 is really no big deal. And then veiled crystals are going to be something that you find throughout the map quite a bit, so you don't have to worry about that either. Like, all of these pieces of resources that you're going to be using for this are not a big deal. So that is why I recommend, if you're going to be upgrading a piece of gear, you could totally upgrade that piece of gear to rank 3 and not worry about it at all. So I'll take this from here. It's this stuff, the Coiling Wards. This is salvaged from and used to improve legendary armor. So as you're breaking down legendary armor, this is where this comes from. So you got to be kind of careful going to rank 4. You want to really like the piece. I would say taking things to rank 4 is going to start happening after you get ancestral items at level 60. That is going to be when I would recommend looking into that. Up until then, take things to rank 3, and that is, consider that your max. Taking something to rank 5 is actually going to be super late game. That is something that is going to take these 2 pieces of resources. So on a weapon, you have the actual same thing as rank 4, but it's the weapon variant of 10 baleful fragments that is going to be salvaged from and used to improve legendary weapons. So keep that in mind, that when you are salvaging a weapon and salvaging a piece of gear, there are actually 2 different resources that you get from that and use to upgrade. Then you also need Forgotten Souls. This is going to be farmed from Helltides that we'll touch on way later that are incredibly important to do. So ranking something up to rank 5, you better be damn sure that this is a in-game piece that you really like, that has perfect rolls, all that stuff, because this is going to be something that is incredibly expensive to do and only worth it on the best. So that is going to be this system here, and you can at least know when it is good to prioritize this so you're not wasting resources. Next very important vendor is the Occultist. We have Imprint aspect, we have Extract aspect, we have Craft Sigils, we have Salvage Sigils, and we have Enchant item. This is going to be someone you're going to be using an absolute ton. So you really need to understand all of this to really get the most out of this in-game vendor. So first one is going to be Imprint aspect. You have a couple things. Codex of Power, these are all going to be found in dungeons. When you beat the dungeon for the first time, you now have unlocked this aspect. You can apply it, but based on the range, how we're talking about how you can see the actual ranges, you will always get the weakest version on the Codex of Power here. This next one from your inventory is done by taking a legendary aspect that you had on a previous piece of gear, and then you're removing it, you extract it, and then you're now applying it on a new piece of gear. So that is what the aspect from the inventory is. Next, this is this section, extract aspect. If I want to break one down, this is how you take it. This is how you get higher rolls than the Codex of Power. Codex of Power would always be, if this was an aspect, it would always roll the 15% variant because that is the minimum. Whereas this one, you happen to roll 17%. So I look at this piece of gear, I'm like, I don't like it. I don't care. I'm never going to make a Rend or an Upheaval Barbarian ever. I'm going to break this down and take this and get this 17%. Ideally, when you're doing this, this is just a gold thing. So it's not the end of the world, but it is quite a bit of gold. So that is how you extract them. They will be in your aspect section, and then they will be saved here and to be used later. You're going to have to be very careful with which one you end up using it on because it's a one-shot deal. You have a perfect roll on a particular legendary. Be sure that to know that you're picking the right one. Also, one thing to keep in mind, it will break down exactly which things that it can go on. Notice how I'm hovering over this, one-handed weapon, and then when it's on a two-handed weapon, increases the power by 100%, and then on the amulet, it's by 50%. So make sure you have your most impactful legendaries placed on your two-hander or on your amulet. For example, in my situation, I had my whirlwind, my dire whirlwind. I had a pretty good roll, 14% out of 16, and then it goes up to 42% out of 48 on the crit rate. So of course I'm going to want to take a very impactful legendary and make it my two-hander. So when you're looking at builds, you got to make sure that where they're putting the legendaries is specified because it's going to massively change your build. What if I, for example, put this on the two-handed weapon, if it was even possible to put on there, because you would have to check to see if it is. Notice how some of them could be ranked. So it could not even be possible to put it on there. But if I did, then now I'm wasting double the crit rate. You know, I would only have 26% potential crit rate, and it would be 7% increasing up to, you know, so it's a massive difference to make sure you put something like this on the two-handed piece. So very important concept to understand. Crafting sigils. This is something that we'll touch on later. This is all going to be all about Nightmare Dungeons. This is not in the scope of what we're going to be talking about now. Salvage sigils is also there. Enchanting an item. I think this is worth talking about. This is very similar to the concept when we were talking about the Blacksmith when it came to upgrading items. So notice how a piece of gear has these four. Here's a better one because I've already done this. So let's take a piece that I haven't used. So this one, I have not changed anything. It has 4 affixes. The ones above the line, those ones I can't change. The lightning resistance and the fire resistance, if it's above the line, those are permanent ones. The ones I can change are below the line. The damage to close enemies, the overpower, the fortified generation, the damage to bleed. So When you're looking at this, you can actually change one of those things and get a random roll, and then it's going to give you an option of you get 2 affixes that you can pick from, and then or you could just not change it. So when you're doing this, I only ever recommend doing this on a piece of gear that you love 3 of the aspects. It's like a god roll on 3, and then the final affix would be like, man, if I could only roll this, then you would do this. Notice how this takes the same very expensive material that I was talking about earlier when it comes to Forgotten Souls. Same thing that takes equipment to rank 5 also takes being able to upgrade the affix of an item. So this is very important that you're picking an in-game piece. Same concept that I said to ranking a piece of gear to rank 5 is going to apply to doing this. This is something that you're only going to do on ancestral gear when you're like level 70-ish and above. That is when I would recommend doing this if you get lucky enough to find a perfect roll piece. One last thing I do want to say though is make sure that you know all of the potential rolls on a piece before you do this. Because if you don't, then you don't even know what you're going for. You just know that you don't like that one roll. So that is my last little tip there when it comes to enchanting items. Okay, so next we have jewelry here. This is incredibly important. We have a few things to break down. We have crafting gems. We have unsocketing gems. We can also add sockets to gems and gear and sockets just in general. And then also upgrading gems. This is just like the blacksmith. You're going to notice very similar themes here. All the similar concepts. First thing let's talk about, because it's quick, is adding a socket. Things you can add a socket to include headpiece. You can have 1. Chest you can have 2. Arms you can have 0. Legs you can have 2. 2-handers 2. And then you can have 1 socket on 1-handers, 2 again here, and then 1, 1, and 1 when it comes to the rings and amulet. Some pieces of gear are just going to have the socket built in. Some of them you're going to have to spend to be able to add the socket. And notice it also takes this resource here and 20. I currently have 20 scattered prisms, but it takes a scattered prism to be able to add a socket. So here would be an example. I have this battle trance. It's ancestral unique. I come here. I'll take a scattered prism, a mysterious prism, most often found in very, very large bodies, such as world bosses. So keep that in mind that this is where this drops. So this is a very rare resource. It also costs a ton of gold to be able to do this, but you can add the socket. What's the point of sockets? Glad you asked. We have multiple options here based on the gem, and then also based on where you're putting it is going to change how it improves your character. Notice how purple ones, we have 8% damage over time on the weapon. We have 8% damage taken over time reduction on the armor. And then on the jewelry, we have 22% shadow resistance. So based on wherever you socket it, you're going to get one of those effects. I would say some of the most popular ones, I see emerald all the time, especially if you're a barbarian, because it is very easy to make people vulnerable. I can just use a glyph, and the second I do damage to them, they're vulnerable. So boom, I just get an automatic critical strike damage to vulnerable enemies. Right there. So that's why these are all green. This concept is going to apply to all of them. So based on what you're going for, what you're looking for, you have many options. Just understand this. Also understand that you can craft them. So 3 flawless rubies makes a royal ruby. 3 rubies makes a flawless ruby. And they go up, and notice how there's different stat benefits based on each one. So this weapon, 24% overpower damage, or it could be 21% on the lower one, or it could be 18%. My recommendation, use the smaller ones for now. As you get more and more, you're going to get a ton of them, especially if as you're really grinding and blasting through high mob density, you're going to see this all the time. We're going to talk about managing your inventory later, because that is going to be the big thing holding you back for most people, is going to be not having good discipline there. This concept's pretty straightforward once you get it. Been doing red here, green here, skulls here. That's pretty standard. Skulls seem to be pretty much universally used on the right side of your gear there, but I have also seen multiple other things. For example, I used to use blue ones here on the left side. That is totally fine. Just based on what your class is, what you're actually applying to the enemies is going to massively change what you're actually looking to do. That is out of the scope of this video. This is more of a conceptual understanding and making sure you are aware of this so you can apply it to your character. If you use a gem, you can unsocket it. You can come in here and unsocket it. It is very expensive, and it's in the fine print. So keep that in mind. Notice how you can't see it. Look how it's like, okay, socketing's free in this game. Crazy. Then you scroll down. Unsocket cost 47K. Keep that in mind. One tip, if you already know that you're going to dismantle that piece of gear, it will give you the gem back as you dismantle it, and it won't cost you any gold. So keep that in mind. That is a good tip to be able to save you some gold, because it does add up. Lastly, we have the ability to upgrade jewelry. Just like how I upgraded all this gear here, I upgraded this jewelry. And the same concepts are going to apply, where the first 3 are not rare at all. First 3 are going to be iron chunks, silver ore, and veiled crystals. Both of these are a little bit more rare. You're never going to run out of the leather one. Whereas this one, you're almost never going to run out of it. I would say, you know, be a little bit more selective of your accessories here, but not too selective. I think it's worth it to have the increased stats, and don't be too stingy with it, but you do want to be a little careful. The things that you do want to make sure that you want to be absolutely positive that this is an amazing piece of gear is going to be your sigils and especially your Forgotten Souls, because this is all Helltide stuff and you're not going to be able to get much of this unless you're really focusing Helltide farming. So I would only recommend dabbling in the level rank 4 and the rank 5 when you start to hit, just like the previous stuff, when you're hit like 65 to 70 and you're maxing out the ancestral gear, or I should say you're maxing out the potential item power of that piece of gear. And when you finally roll a really good piece, then you can pull the trigger and go with a 5th upgrade. Let's talk about some stash tips here. First, I do want to say that I think the stash is by far the biggest thing, especially from a UI perspective. There's so many things that we can discuss about making this better, but I just want to give you the facts on what we actually have here. Is going to be missed equipment. You can get up to 10 saved here as you're farming. If you don't pick up the legendary piece of gear, it will go here. But notice how it's 1 out of 10. You want to be checking this here and there. And also on the mini map, notice how there's this little exclamation mark. Lost items have been sent to your stash. It will let you know. This also includes mounts. If you ever leave a mount there, it's going to go here as well. So 1 out of 10 missed items, you can pick it up. And then that is only going to apply to legendaries. It's not going to apply to rare pieces of gear. If you leave that on the ground, it's not coming back. I recommend, especially this is going to apply when you're past 60, World Tier 4. The only pieces of gear I pick up are going to be ancestral rare items. And if anything, I don't even pick up the legendary pieces. What I do is I put them here because they're going to be sent to me anyway. And then I will evaluate them from there because I'm trying to min-max the amount of storage I have because we really don't have much. They really need to add another tab here for gems. So another thing that you can do is as you're farming a ton, but if you have gems here and you know you've already decided that there's going to be pieces here that you're going to be crushing to save inventory space. Like let's say I have this and these, and I want to try to get as much yellow gear as possible before I finally have to go back and salvage. And you're also getting a ton of gems. What I recommend doing is just socketing stuff in. You just socket stuff in and it's going to save you a ton of actual space here in your inventory. And then imagine I'm farming all this stuff. I've already decided, oh, that's all gone. This is all going to be dismantled. Okay, put it all in. Now I have more room. Now let's keep grinding without having to go back, have an annoying situation where you have to break stuff down. I like to have this organized. Currently, you know, as I say this, I don't have it organized, but here is my system roughly. This is going to be something that is going to help you massively when it comes to organizing gear and making it to where you can actually keep upgrading and keep looking and knowing what to do to be able to evaluate pieces of gear. I like to have all my weapons on the first page. I like to have every piece of gear on the left side that you can, like boots, legs, arms, helm, and armor. Over here on the second page, I like to have rings and accessories over here. And then I like to have my consumables on the right side. This is going to be my ideal organization system. Definitely gotten a little out of hand. And then I can just see them. You can organize them and it goes by type. So I just go through the ranks. Do I have what I'm looking for? I go through my, chest piece and stuff. Do I have what I'm looking for? What's out of the scope of this video is specifically what I'm looking for because this is an incredibly complicated concept. What I'm also looking for is going to change based on not only the class that I have, but also what I'm missing, what I feel like I'm missing in my build, and also what my build is even looking for. So there's so many different things. This is its own video all on its own. What I'm looking for is going to change based on what you're looking for based on the class. What you'll find is as you do this, you'll start to really understand what is even possible to roll in each piece of gear as a substat affix. Your real power comes from affixes. Notice how I have like double crit damage here, double crit damage here. I have crit damage over here. I have crit damage over here. I have crit damage over here. All that kind of stuff really starts to add up. If I didn't have that, I'm not hitting nearly as hard. Those are going to be things to keep in mind. Knowing what can actually roll on each piece and knowing that you're not going to get any crit damage here. You're not going to get any crit damage here, but I do have it on every possible piece that can roll crit damage. For example, over here, cooldown reduction. I have it over here. Cooldown reduction. I have it over here. I know that I'm not going to be able to get it in other places. I have it in the places I know I can get it. And this is another reason why I like this system of organization, because I will start to learn from comparison. Oh, okay, it can roll here. It can roll here. And then as I go through, and then what I will do is I'll separate them. Okay, some of them I'm going to turn into an affix because they roll really well. Some of them I'm just going to break down because I want the materials. There's an obvious color difference from the leveling up, but then there's this darker color. These are going to be sacred uniques. These are legendary pieces of gear that are a little bit more rare. What's interesting about them is that the affixes are not random. So there's a random range in how well they can roll, but what you can actually get for them is always going to be the same. And you can notice that here, Hellhammer here, and Hellhammer here. Notice how both Hellhammers, damage with two-handed bludgeoning weapons, damage to crowd control enemies, damage to burning enemies, and then damage reduction from enemies that are burning. Same thing here. Damage with two-handed, damage with crowd control, damage to burning, damage reduction from enemies that are burning. So, and it has the upheaval like special effects. So notice when you see these unique two-handers that the affixes are stuck. And you can't change them. I can't go into the Blacksmith and change one of these like I was showing you guys that I can on the other ones. These are always the same. If I ever get one of these guys in a Butcher Cleaver, it's always going to be these affixes. And it's always going to be the effect. So that is one thing to keep in mind when it comes to these. But I think they're totally worth saving. Even they might not have the best roll or whatever. I always save them. I'm not getting rid of them. Unless I have two like I do here in Hellhammer and Hellhammer. And then I might get rid of them. But I have plenty of room. You know, I haven't gone through in quite a while. So that is why I haven't done it. This is definitely the system that can use the most work. And hopefully they add more tabs. I'm making do with what we got. Go through it, clean it out. And then you'll have a way better idea of what you can actually roll. And when you're actually gaining power for your build. Okay, so now let's talk about some tips to prepare you for in-game and give you an idea of what the in-game is going to be looking like. So after you beat campaign, you come here. You need to be able to do a capstone dungeon to unlock Nightmare. And then this is going to unlock the two pieces of content that is going to be the in-game content. You have Nightmare Sigils and you have Helltides. And the two things, Nightmare Sigils, the entire point of them is to upgrade your glyphs for your Paragon board. Because at level 50, you unlock the Paragon board. The Nightmare Sigils are going to be giving experience for these glyphs here. So you have them slotted in, one per board. So I got one right here, got one right here. And this is going to be the big thing that determines your path. Okay, so notice how this one is level 12, whereas this one's level 5. This one's level 4. As you level it up, there's going to be certain bonuses. There's the bonus at the top, grants 80% bonus to all magic nodes within range. As I level that up, that percentage bonus gets higher. Then, notice at the very top, next radius increase at level 15. So the radius increase is going to be this red portion here, because the effects of a glyph are affected based on what you have increased within this. So then this one, the requirements purchased in radius range, 40 strength. So within this red marking here, I have 40 strength activated. So that is why I'm getting, after casting a shout skill, the active cooldown. The active cooldown for every other shout skill is reduced by 1.2 seconds. If I didn't have enough strength in here, I would not be able to get this effect. But one of the nice things about doing Nightmare Sigils and using that experience to rank this up to 15, for example, is now my area of influence is going to change one piece over. So now I have all of this other strength I could get to impact the requirements for this radius range for this additional bonus effect. Also, notice how grants 80% bonus to all magic nodes. That started at 40% bonus to all magic nodes. And magic nodes are these blue ones here. They're 5% physical damage, but it's 9% physical damage because it's increasing it by 80% within the range of influence of this glyph. So then what will happen is once I rank this up to 15, I'm going to get one more layer here, and all of these magic nodes are going to get increased by the percentage bonus of this glyph. So it's very important content to do is farming Nightmare Sigils. That is going to be the main intended way to progress the account. So let me show you how the Nightmare Sigil system works. So we have these consumables here. And as you do more Nightmare Sigils, you'll find they'll also drop more sigils. So notice the difference that there's a sacred sigil here, and then there is a ancestral sigil here. When you're in world tier 3, you need to do the tier that says sacred, and it'll tell you right there. Requires world tier 3 right here, and requires world tier 4 over here. Then what you do is you just use the sigil. So let's use a small one here, tier 21. Everything is usually scaled to your level. When I'm killing an enemy and I'm level 76, I'm killing another level 76 enemy. And then the elites will scale like a little higher always. Whereas when it comes to Nightmare Sigils, they always scale to whatever level the tier of that sigil is. So if I do a level 36 Nightmare Sigil, then I'm always going to face level 90 enemies, whether I'm level 76 or I'm level 90. Even if I'm way above it, it's never going to scale to it. It's only going to scale to the tier of the Nightmare Sigil. So this is the in-game system that makes it to where you always gain power as you level up. In other situations with the scaling mechanic, you might feel weaker as you level up. This is going to be the part of the content that is going to reward you for actually getting stronger in every way possible, never punish you for it, and give you more experience into your glyphs. This is the true in-game system. This is going to be the intended gameplay loop for progressing later on in the game. Notice how there's going to be dungeon affixes applied when you do this. So it takes the normal dungeon. It's going to randomly pick one of the many dungeons in the game. You just complete the dungeon, get the experience, but it's kind of interesting to talk about the dungeon affixes. Notice a pattern when it comes to the affixes. You'll always notice that the top one is going to be some kind of bonus effect. So you'll find more gold, which isn't really not that great. What I care about is beating the thing, because beating it is going to be way more valuable, and getting that experience is the most valuable thing here on your glyphs. So I want something that's actually applying to making it possible to punch up higher on the tier level. So reduce cooldowns on kill. That'd be fantastic as a barbarian. Killing a monster reduces your cooldowns by 0.25 seconds. Amazing. Then we have deal lightning damage. I don't do any lightning damage. I don't care about that. And shadow damage, I don't do any of that. I'm like mostly physical, bleed, stuff like that. Like damage over time. And then being able to hit by control. Oh, so controlled impair explosions. Being hit by control impairing effects creates an explosion around you. That's pretty dope. You know, like there's all these things that are going to benefit, and finding the ones that you like are going to help a ton. Now let's look at the predictable patterns of the negative affixes, because these are all pretty predictable on each tier. So we have on the first one, the Death Pulse. We have Empowered Elites. We have Death Pulse again. We also have Nightmare Portal. And then these are all going to be kind of main effects that are affecting like the elites and like the main enemies kind of. This is going to be that kind of pattern. And you'll notice it over time as you see a ton of these. So killing a monster releases a deadly lightning pulse after a short delay. Or elites always have the cold enchanted affix, which is really annoying, by the way. Death Pulse again. Then we also have Nightmare Portal while in combat. Nightmare Portals randomly open near players, pouring out dangerous monsters. Depending on your build, like me personally, I like it because the more enemies, the better for me. I need as much fury generation as possible. So that is why I kind of like that. And then Blood Blister, killing a monster has a chance to spawn a Blood Blister. After a short time, it explodes and dealing heavy area damage. Just the AoE on this is crazy far, by the way. It's like a massive nuke. So don't underestimate how far this will explode on you. The cold enchanted again. So you're starting to see the patterns here. Then now let's go one step further, the monster shadow damage. Notice how these are always going to be very similar. So monster fire damage, monster bleeding damage, it's always some kind of take a damage type and then put it as a bleed or as a damage over time effect would be more specific. Monster fire damage, monsters deal additional 20% of their physical damage as fire. Monsters deal 30% of their physical damage as bleeding. Monsters deal an additional 30% of their physical damage as bleeding again. Then we have physical damage as burning. The physical damage as lightning. Very predictable tier there. Next we have this next tier. So this is like a resist tier. So monsters shadow damage over time resist by 60% of their shadow. Monsters fire resist. They have critical resist. That would really suck against my build. Probably everyone's build. Boss monsters gain 15% life steal. That'd be terrible. I don't really do good boss damage. So them being able to leech life off me would be pretty rough. The monsters take 60% less damage from critical strike. And then now we have the final tier. I would say this is probably the most random out of all of them. There's not like a theme here, from my understanding, because like look at the differences here. We have barrier breakers, we have unstoppable monsters. This one, keep this one in mind. There is a legendary that increases damage to unstoppable, or when someone's unstoppable, you'll have extra damage. This is the reason why people get it, is because of this affix here on your Nightmare Sigils, because it's basically something that you'll see this a ton. The unstoppable monster affix from your Nightmare Sigils is basically just free damage. Keep that in mind when you see that legendary affix. That is actually pretty good when you start to do this content. And then you have the vulnerable resist, or you have armor breakers, or you have vulnerable resist again, barrier breakers. So it is a little predictable on there's a couple things, but it's not like an obvious tier. Like the one above it is like, that's the resist tier. And then the one above that is like the damage over time tier. Keep that in mind when it comes to these, but they're at least kind of predictable, and there's not like a crazy amount of these, but when you combine them all, that's where it gets crazy. So let's apply one, just show you how it works. Here we go. We got this one right here. Here's my lowest one for World Tier 4. It is a Tier 21. This is going to be the dungeon. All those effects that you just saw on the Nightmare Sigil before I used it are applied right here. You're going to do the dungeon. And then at the very end of it, you can upgrade your glyph. And then now we're back at the Occultist. This is the part that I was talking about earlier, where you can craft sigils. So as you do Nightmare Sigils, you'll drop Nightmare Sigils, and there's going to be some that you don't want to mess with. Some of them you actually want to do, and you're going to be trying to find, basically the end game is going to be finding the sweet spot of challenging sigils that are not too hard. You want the hardest possible one you can do, but not so hard that you're really struggling for it. And what you can end up doing here is you could craft the sigil tier of where you think you can actually challenge it with this powder. So there's sigil powder. Notice I have 125 of it, and then cost of craft is really not that much. Then I can make this tier, and it's going to randomly roll it within this range. And then I can challenge that tier. And what I can also do is come here and salvage sigils. So like, let's say I want to salvage this actual irreversibly destroy all sacred nightmare sigils in your inventory. Are you sure you want to do this? This is going to be something that I'm probably going to do to wipe out all of the sigils I have in this range, because I'm progressed beyond that. I can't even do that because I'm in World Tier 4. I'm in World Tier 4 versus World Tier 3. So I could if I wanted to, and then be able to get that. And then you can just come here and individually break them down and see what you get. Here, I just got 4 sigil power, for doing that. And then I can come here. Let's just break a couple other ones. Another 4. Looks like it's 4 for, the top end versions of the sacred ones, but it could go all the way down to just 1, if you have some lower ones here. So let's break all these down so you can kind of get an idea. Then I can now create stuff if I wanted to. And then normally I do like anywhere from like 32 to 36 level to give you an idea. So like, let's break down to 21. Boom, now I just got 19 sigil power. So then now I can come here and craft the one I would want. Let's say it go 21 to 25, or let's go 26 to 30. I would say this is going to be more in my range. It costs 80 power. And then I craft it. Boom, I just got one at tier 29. So it high rolled there, which is great. That's going to give me more experience, because that's the big thing about Nightmare Sigils, is that you get more experience the higher the tier for your glyph. That is going to be the main benefit of doing the higher versions. And it's a fun challenge to be able to push it and see how strong your build is, because I think this is going to be the way that everyone's going to rate their build, where it's like, okay, I'm a barbarian that is running a whirlwind build. It's like, okay, most perfect in-game version of that, they can push, like let's say they can push like tier 80. For example, whereas like, oh, okay, I'm running the Hoda build. Like, oh, the Hoda build's better than Whirlwind. That one could push up to like 85, for example, is how people are going to basically rate the in-game and rate your in-game builds. Now let's talk about the Helltide. And as you can notice on the map here, you'll notice there is red all over here. So this is the full coverage of the Helltide zone. Basically, it's every hour. So it's an hour on, hour off, hour on, and it will randomly appear on the map, and you'll see it kind of cloud up a certain section. The red over here is not a Helltide. This is a PvP zone. These will always be red, but notice how they're a little brighter color. That is why. So that you have the PvP zone there, and then you have the Helltide event that you'll find moving around the map on an every other hour basis. Then as you go through the Helltide, what you'll be doing, let's actually go here. There's going to be a currency that you find by doing activities in this section. As you're in the section, you'll notice it will give you the actual duration of the time frame still remaining. And then also will tell you how much of this currency you have as you just kill enemies in this area. And they will drop this currency as you go through. When the Helltide duration ends in 49 minutes, you will lose all of this currency. So what you actually do with this currency in this time frame is you're going to go through and you need to find these stashes here. These stashes are going to be the thing you actually purchase and get rewards from doing this. I will link in the description a map of all the hidden caches that you can't see here, and these are a little better. And then they range anywhere from 75 to 175 of the actual currency to be able to buy the stuff from this. And this will actually, this is the whole point of this. Then there's multiple currencies that we talked about earlier that you needed from Helltides, and those can be found here in the materials section. The two ones that you really want to be looking for and can only come exclusively from Helltides is going to be the Fiend Rose. And then down here, you have the Forgotten Soul. And we talked about it. You can go back through the video, the sections that actually those things apply to, but they're really big. When it comes to upgrading your gear to rank 5, you need that piece of gear, the Forgotten Soul. And then also when it comes to changing the affixes of your gear, you're going to need Forgotten Soul. This is the in-game currency. This is why it's so important and why I would definitely prioritize Helltides going through here, because you need both of those pieces of the currency to progress your character to its full like max power state. one thing I do want to say as well is you want to save some, because when you hit level 90, you're going to need this currency, or even 80. You're going to need the Fiend Rose to be able to upgrade your potion. Your potion here can get stronger at level 80 and 90, and you're going to need that resource to be able to do that. That is another thing to keep in mind and why this is so important.